Hate number 5, it's a pure road car. Let's start with the fact that absolutely all owners admit, the X5 is not an SUV, and you shouldn't torture the car by trying to operate it in conditions for which it was not originally intended. This can't end well. The video where the guys drag their X5 off-road is especially upsetting. I would like to say, what are you guys doing? This car is not for that. You need another car, just not the X5. Why mock him and then swear at him on the forums that something is broken there? But then the owners are divided into two large groups. The first one believes that the cross-country ability of the X5 is quite normal, at least it is quite consistent with the tasks that the owners face. The existing clearance, according to the Passport 220mm, is enough to drive around the city in winter and summer, to storm the obstacles that are in abundance on our roads and in yards, go out with the family to nature. I don't drive into the wilds, over gullies for tractors and similar obstacles, the assault of which the owners of real rogues usually boast of. There is no need, but through wet grass or mud, uphill and downhill, over gravel on scree and similar obstacles is going well. There are quite a few of them. Their reviews constantly mention trips to nature, fishing and other similar activities. And for the city and our uncleaned winter yards, the capabilities of the car are definitely enough. But the second group, whose representatives were frankly disappointed by the off-road capabilities of the X5, is even more numerous. For me, the off-road qualities that I had in mind when purchasing were a big disappointment. This car is not suitable for driving on primers and off-road. It's written in the book, four-wheel drive can be used on dirt roads, but this is undesirable. Yes, representatives of this group are frankly not satisfied with the behavior of the X5, not even off-road, but simply on bad roads, graders and dirt roads. The car categorically does not tolerate bad roads, and what are the bad ones? Even slight irregularities. Everything is transferred to the body, and the sensations are not pleasant. And in general, if you like active recreation, I do not advise you to buy an X5. Not only does it cause great discomfort, but repairs can also cost a lot of money. Why are there primers? In many reviews, the owners mention that the car really does not like longitudinal rutting, especially if it is shod with different sized tires with 20-inch front and 21-inch wheels at the rear. Only on these rinks do you get a true BMW, such as intended by the manufacturer. But get ready for discomfort at the slightest rut. The car jumps out of the rut, the rear rollers simply do not fit in it, and you won't be able to hold the steering wheel with one hand. Forget about it. Just a hard grip on the steering wheel with both hands. In fairness, it is worth recognizing that an honest all-wheel drive X-Drive is really able to help out in a peak situation, in a critical situation. For example, in the review of one of the owners, I came across a story about how, during a trip to Europe, he got into the flood zone in Croatia. I waited an hour until Defender appeared, who boldly moved forward. I let him go 200 meters and followed him. The water was definitely above the threshold. There is a video, but there was no water inside. I walked like that for about a kilometer. Love number 5, designed to be a travel car. So, the BMW X5 is not very good off-road, or just on bad roads, but on quality highways. According to the general opinion, it is just great. Well, if so, then it's worth treating this car as a means for long-distance travel. I used to drive fast and far and never got very tired. My record, Moscow-Krasnodar in 13 hours without stopping for a long rest, only refueling 2 times, and if I had to go further, I would go, because I didn't feel very tired. Diesel versions are especially good in this regard. Europeans are very correctly positioning the diesel BMW X5 as a travel car. Everything is done in it so that the driver enjoys the road, enjoys driving, and can drive measuredly and far. Although the car is powerful and torquey, it is completely unsuitable for racing. At the same time, it is very important that the X5 allows you to feel very confident on a long journey. The handling and safety of the car is beyond praise. More than once I got into dangerous situations on the road, and there were sharp maneuvers, and drifts, and emergency braking for the brakes. In general, a separate 5 with a plus, and always my faithful horse helped me out. At the same time, it is worth remembering that the X5, in its inner essence, is a provocateur car, but it's not at all necessary to succumb to these provocations. The owner's right that when you get used to the car, you start to steer more smoothly and slow down gently. By the way, on the X5 you can absolutely safely travel not only to the south, but also to cold and harsh lands. Even diesel versions, not to mention gasoline ones, calmly endure colds down to -35°C, start up normally and allow you to drive for hours in a light sweater, throwing a warm jacket on the back seat, and there are a lot of such statements. As for experience of winter operation of a diesel engine, then there were no problems. Even in winter in Bombay at -28 it started up with a pinch. And what, in fact, is the thrill that he has an electric heater in the heating system. He started it, and warm air immediately went out. The only complaint is that the owners complain that the standard equipment does not include windshields with full heating, although you can still find and install such glass. Well, there's one more drawback that manifests itself specifically on long trips. The standard navigation is not the best, which works with limitations and errors not only in Russia, but also in many European countries. In the Chelyabinsk region, the navigator did not know some of the roads between cities asphalt and laid for a long time. I'm not even talking about new interchanges inside the city. Hate number 4, search difficulty. In so many reviews, the thought sounds, the BMW X5 E70 is a great car, and even when buying on the secondary market it can bring a lot of pleasure, but it's very difficult to buy such a car. X5 is a good car, but you go and find it on the secondary then the market. And we are not talking about the complete absence of this model on sale. We are talking about finding the right car that will not start to crumble after the purchase and will not leave the buyer without pants. I have been looking for the third month only first-hand and only from the owners, but either it's too expensive, or I don't have time to buy it, or for 1,000 kilometers. Good cars are snatched out in the first hours after being put up for sale. I'm talking about Moscow and the Moscow region. There are a lot of cars with twisted mileage. The mileage is twisted for everyone. I like the man who has an oil change tag for 95,000 kilometers under the hood, and 65 on the odometer, and a German in awesome condition who left the German region with 195,000 on board, and then hop and 75,000. Many owners in their reviews write that you need to look for richly equipped equipment. Such machines more fully reveal the advantages of the model. My advice, do not take the drum edition, you will always want to complete it. My minimum set is comfortable seats, speaker drive, projection. A set of maximum. Well, there is no limit to perfection. By the way, there is one little secret, it is worth trying to find a car with a towing device. If this is a factory option, then this automatically adds a more powerful radiator fan, a reinforced rear gearbox, a different version of the automatic transmission firmware, and a number of other goodies that have a positive effect on reliability. But what to do if, during the search, you constantly encounter the situation either buy a corpse and invest even more, or a beggarly version, but ideally, it is unlikely that anyone can give a definite answer to this question. Love number 4, cost effectiveness. The owner of a 400 horsepower monster, who considers it very economical. Say, fantastic? But not when it comes to the BMW X5. In at least 2/3 of the reviews, the authors consider efficiency to be one of the important advantages of the model, and it would be nice if these were exclusively owners of diesel versions. With diesels, everything is really clear. Even the owners of the xDrive 40D, 306 horsepower, 6.6 seconds to 100, and M50D, 381 horsepower, acceleration to 100 km/h 5.4 seconds, boast consumption on the highway at 100 to 120 km/h 8 liters of diesel fuel, at 120 to 150 10 liters. Taking into account periodic traffic jams due to road repairs, an average of 1,100 kilometers were driven on one tank. On the motorways of Europe, where a maximum of 130 kilometers per hour is allowed, you set the cruise control to 139 kilometers per hour, cameras do not respond, and you get a consumption of 9 liters per 100 kilometers. Checked by computer and by the amount of fuel poured. Well, and the massive 245 horsepower xDrive 30D completely pleases the owners. the average consumption is no more than 9 liters per 100, in the city about 10 to 11, with a very active ride. Well, on the highway it all depends on the speed, although in order to get 7 to 8 L/100 kilometers, you don't need to make any special efforts, just drive within the traffic rules. Oddly enough, the owners of the X5 4.4-liter V8. Even without cruise control, fuel consumption for such cars rarely exceeds 15 L/100 kilometers, and even in the city, which X-Drive 50i owners do not bother at all, fuel consumption is directly proportional to the force applied to the gas pedal, while the 8-speed automatic significantly saves gasoline both on highway and in the urban cycle, in the summer of 11 to 12 liters of the 95th per 100 kilometers, in winter 13 to 14. But among the owners of X-Drive 35i, equipped with an inline-6 and 55B30, there are enough dissatisfied. Actually, only they are ready to write down the expense among the shortcomings. Gasoline eats a lot, an average of 16 liters per 100 in the city. At speed, consumption soars to 18 to 20 liters. But there is no complete unity in their ranks. In the urban cycle, no more than 12 liters, on the highway, in general, 8.5, and these are real numbers. But even if it turns out significantly more, not everyone considers this a disadvantage. Fuel consumption when driving in the style of a pensioner in the city is 13 to 14 liters, on the highway 8. If you drown, then 20 liters can run over. I'm happy with this expense. Hate number 3, stiff suspension. It is clear that suspension stiffness is a very subjective parameter. More precisely, the assessment of this parameter by car owners is subjective. But the stiffness of the BMW X5 suspension has become a characteristic that many reviewers complain about, although they are clearly aware that this is the price to pay for refined handling. On the downside, I can note the stiffness of the suspension. Yes, fantastic handling has its drawbacks. In general, you get used to the rigidity, but when you change to another class, you suddenly feel more comfort and less controllability. The car on standard run-flat tires seems especially tough. I didn't like it. Constant stiffness does not give any tangible advantage in handling. Everything is fine with it anyway, rather, it makes the suspension more oak. This rigidity also has unobvious consequences. On an uneven road the trunk shelf begins to rattle. The rear parcel shelf is a separate song. It rattles so much that it pawns the ears. Add discomfort and locks fixing the rear seats. They snap around the U-shaped brackets, and over time, due to vibration, small gaps form in this unit, which begin to clack. This very common sore is treated using a completely collective form method. You need to wrap the U-shaped ears with the most ordinary insulation. Of course, over time, the electrical tape will be wiped, but such treatment is enough for 20,000. You can also get rid of the rumbling of the shelf, but you won't be able to get by with electrical tape. Love number 3, versatility, practicality, comfort. Crossovers originally appeared as a class of universal cars, and in this regard, the BMW X5 is quite consistent with the class parameters. But still, the versatility of the E70 has its own special features. An amazing car, because it combines many factors together that will allow you to move every day in different conditions. It can be either an economical, safe, comfortable and roomy family crossover or a brutal monster with confident dynamics and impeccable steering, the owner's right. As a rule, ghosts of the highway are not very practical, but the BMW X5 the practicality of a family car with the emotionality of a sports car. Interior and trunk space? Quite sufficient. A large interior and a roomy trunk plus four-wheel drive and high ground clearance make this car ideal for a family. The tailgate has a nice feature. It consists of 2 parts rising up and leaning down. The resulting shelf is quite functional. You can sit on it, you can spread out a snack when you stop along the way. But another important function is to keep your pants clean. Because even if you need to climb into the very depths of the trunk, then you rest against the clean end of the shelf, and not against the dirty bumper. Hate number 2, sensor car. And transfer cases. But all these advantages are felt when the car is in good working order and normally moves you from point A to point B. But there are too many stories on the internet about a long and not very successful struggle with constant breakdowns. This is the sensor's car, not yours. Something is always not working, exclaims one of the owners. I spent this year near the lift, reading forums, asking everyone, ordering spare parts, echoes another. With BMW, I despaired for the first time and gave up the idea of further bringing the car back to life. The worst thing is that you just change everything that was said in the service, and I tried different services both for repairs and for diagnostics. You just start using the car for its intended purpose, how it beeps, blinks and costs time and money again and again. And first of all these complaints concern gasoline cars with N-series engines. And here's the thing. Since 2005, the Bavarian concern began to consistently replace M-series engines with new and more advanced N-series engines, so the X5 E70 initially entered the production line with this particular range. Everything looked very beautiful, the engines became more powerful, more environmentally friendly, and more economical. But these pies turned out to be by no means free. The operating temperature of the engine was increased from 93 to 97 to 102 to 108 degrees, citing the fact that at this temperature the fuel burns better, the engine efficiency is better, and fuel efficiency is higher. But the electric pump on the new N-series motor has the same service life as the old mechanical pump on the M-series motor, but it costs 10 times more. Due to the higher operating temperature, the service life of valve stem seals was reduced by a factor of 3, and if on old engines the factory seals easily lasted for 200,000, then on modern N engines the oil life is already ensured with runs of about 100,000 kilometers. The quality of modern BMW engines with their Vanos variable valve timing systems and Valvetronic intake valve lift control system is very much dependent on the condition and volume of oil in the engine. But on N-series gasoline engines there is no conventional oil dipstick, but only the corresponding sensor. So even checking the condition of the oil after replacement is virtually impossible. And among not the most responsible servicemen, the practice of partial replacement is quite common. We will fill in only half of the purchased new oil and leave the remaining half of the old one, but let the saved money be sold to the next client. And the condition of the engine is very difficult to assess. Endoscope? So the endoscope allows you to see the condition of the cylinder walls, but the camera will not see the coked oil reflecting rings. To accurately understand the condition of a gasoline engine, you just need to disassemble it. But in the end, the owners write that all gasoline E70s with a mileage of over 70,000 kilometers are a pig in a poke. You can write a separate article about problems with gasoline BMW E70s, which is what we did. But in this case, the only important thing is that the voices of the owners, writing about how they took a car with a mileage of 50,000 and drove 150,000 without major repairs, do not drown out the complaints of the dissatisfied. As a result, in the secondary market, diesel X5s are 200 to 400,000 more expensive than gasoline ones in comparable trim levels, despite the fact that gasoline ones are more powerful, faster and, in theory, should be more in demand. In fact, everything is strictly the opposite. Cars with diesel engines are considered much more reliable, since the common rail technology is well developed, and the heat load of Bavarian diesel engines is much less. Problems also happen with diesel engines. Turbines fail, EGR and a particulate filter may ask for money. At the same turn of 150,000, problems with piezo injectors can be expected. Nevertheless, the internet community is confidently of the opinion that diesel E70s are significantly more reliable. But people are fighting not only with motors. For example, there are problems with the transfer case, which did not pass very many. The symptom is simple: the car starts to twitch. I saw such cars and grew cold in anticipation of this misfortune. They began to frighten me from 80,000, they say, get ready, Razdaka. And I naturally began to listen and twitch myself at every rustle. And the thing is that on the previous version of the transfer case there was a pump for forced lubrication, which did not prove itself in the best way. It broke down often, lived a little. As a result, in the new ATC 450 transfer case, unlike its predecessors ATC 500 and ATC 700, oil is supplied to the clutch pack using a chain, that is, under the action of centrifugal force from chain rotation. but normally they are lubricated only at speeds of more than 40 km/h, and if you constantly drive at low speeds and in urban traffic jams, then oil will not be supplied to moving parts, and the result of such chronic underlubrication is the death of the transfer case at a young age. Quite often, the electronic parking brake starts to freak out. Only a broken handbrake control unit is a consequence, and the reason, as a rule, is that due to lack of proper maintenance over the previous years of operation, the brake cables leading from the unit to the pads have acidified. As a result, in the same block, the current supplied to the motor increases, from which the power relay melts, which, due to the increased current, operates at its limit. In general, there are quite good reasons for saying that this is not your car, but a sensor. Love number 2, status. Whatever you say, any BMW car enhances the status of its owner, and even more so an expensive model like the X5. The advantages of the X5 include not only handling, but also show-off, if show-off is very important to you. Yes, the theme of respect on the road is heard in many reviews. The car is respected on the road, but you still shouldn't drive it. You need to respect other drivers, and if you feel good, you don't need to spoil the nerves of others. Of course, the image of BMW is spoiled by the trail from the 90s, although all this gangster chaos is a thing of the past. But this trace is still felt to this day, and in discussions it is quite possible to come across the following statement: you have to be a complete idiot to dump a lot of money into this bucket, which has become the hero of jokes about bandits, for the sake of showing off. Good luck to all ponto cutters and free lifts. But the army of fans of the brand is still larger. However, there is one more point: the status and dynamic potential of the car attracts numerous racers and riders who have neither the desire nor the means for quality service, which really cannot be called cheap. In turn, those who bought a car from such riders on the secondary market join the ranks of haters, since the car inevitably begins to crumble. Hate number 1, expensive content. The main disadvantage of the BMW X5 E70 owners clearly consider the high cost of maintenance and upkeep. If you want to drive fast, comfortably, and beautifully, pay. The car is very complex mechanically and electrically. Large units rarely fail, but little things annoy quite often, and spare parts are not cheap. The only consolation is that, as a rule, the necessary spare parts are always in stock, although no one knows what will happen in the current conditions, and also that the car is well known to mechanics, and in large cities it is not a problem to find the right service. It is strange that in not a single review, either laudatory or abusive, none of the owners mention the transport tax. But only cars with 245 horsepower diesel engines fall into a relatively favorable tax zone, the owners of which will have to pay 18,375 rubles annually. But for owners of 306 horsepower versions, both diesel and gasoline, the tax amount will be 45,900 rubles. For owners of 381 horsepower M50D, 57,150. And for those who started the car with a 4.4-liter V8, 61,050 rubles. Add to this regular maintenance. Moreover, the owners unanimously advise reducing the interval between scheduled maintenance from the recommended 15,000 kilometers to 10, and even better, to 6 to 7,000. At the same time, the price of even the simplest maintenance, as a rule, was about 17 to 18,000 rubles, reaching in some cases up to 40 to 45,000. But this is not the limit. Here the owner of the X-Drive 50i version writes, "I had to do a lot of routine maintenance, where I changed valve stem seals, chains in the engine, injectors, ignition coils, candles, exhaust pipes, radiator with expansion tank. On the suspension changed air springs and front levers. One thing I can say, all this is very expensive." And it should also be noted that the figures given are taken from reviews written a year or two ago, and what they will turn into today, one can only estimate. Again, when purchasing a used car, you need to be ready to immediately invest in putting it in order, and here you need to be ready to shell out from 100 to 300,000, depending on the state of the purchase, all oils with filters, glow plugs, battery, hub bearing, 2 silent blocks, lower lever, clutches in the razdatka, began to twitch, burned soot, cleaned USR, change the door lock cable. In terms of money, about $120,000. And in addition to regular maintenance, unscheduled breakdowns are possible, which are inevitable for a car aged about 10 years, and equally unscheduled repair costs. Here, of course, no specific figures can be given, but every year minus $100,000, and then if you're lucky. In general, it's definitely not worth taking the BMW X5 E70 with the last money, and in any version. Love number 1, driving pleasure. So what do X5 owners get from their beloved top model? What does she give them? And she gives them what is called driving pleasure, and this concept includes handling, and trajectory stability, and dynamics. This is the first car that I drove. After a week behind the wheel, I began to get direct physical pleasure from the process itself. Management. And such statements can be quoted literally endlessly. First of all, of course, the owners note the branded handling, great handling. In winter the car has never skidded, although, believe me, sometimes on an icy road you will step on the gas. You almost don't notice acceleration and speed. The speed of 120 to 130 is felt only by the cars that you overtake. The car's handling is above all praise. There are no complaints. I rode both in the rain and in the snow. Hydroplaning, no drifts were observed. It clings to the road with a stranglehold. It was not even possible to deliberately throw it into a skid, but I didn't try hard. By the way, the owners note the exceptionally correct operation of the stabilization systems. No electronics cancel the laws of physics, but otherwise the car on the road is like an iron. He follows the wheel clearly. You drive as if you were drawing with a compass and a sharp pencil. Well, dynamics, where would we be without dynamics? At any speed, you can confidently overtake, knowing that you have enough power to complete the maneuver. At the same time, the braking dynamics are quite consistent with the accelerating ones. The brakes stop dead in their tracks on demand. You get so used to it that if you change to another car, you can drive into someone's backside. And for all this, the X5 is loved, and many of its vagaries are forgiven. BMW is loved for its handling, for its dynamics, for its well-tuned brakes, for its character. I don't think the BMW guys couldn't make a car as reliable as a Toyota, but then it wouldn't be a BMW anymore. There will be no precision in control, there will be no dynamics, braking, or adequate fuel consumption. And if so, what is surprising in the fact that the owners write that every trip is a pleasure?